Oh, Pyro, hello. How you doing, Pyro? You all right, my love? Right. As we lost what we were doing last night, I thought we'd redo the Woodman's Enigma. Then, as an added surprise, HBY, happy, happy something. Bubby Bubby? I don't know. I don't know what that means. Anyway, I thought since I'm just gonna send before we start reading, I'm just gonna say hello to everyone, do some smiley faces and say hello, positive wise squad. There we go. Hello, positive and wise squad. I've got my fluffy dressing gown on. I've got my microphone on, and we're everyone's ready for a story. We'll start. Woodman's Enigma by Gary Kilworth. They played a game called Enigmas, riddles, which they would normally do on their home computer. Since they were on the train, they had to play against each other, one inventing an unusual situation, the other making an intelligent guess as to how the situation came about. The game was a puzzle, often a murder, which the second player had to solve. "I've got one," said Colin. "Romeo and Juliet are lying dead on the floor in a pool of liquid. They are surrounded by broken glass. What happened?" 10-year-old sister Jill snorted. "That's an old one, Colin. Romeo and Juliet are goldfish. The liquid is water, and the bits of glass are their smashed goldfish bowl." He flicked her blonde ponytail. "Think of a new one." Colin, fair-haired and tall for 13 years of age, sighed, stared out of the window at the falling snow. "I can't," he said. "Not anymore. I've run out of ideas. We really need a computer for a good enigma. I don't expect Uncle Giles to have one. He's 60-something." A train stopped at Basildon Newtown, and the pair stared out of the window at the brightly lit streets, full of shoppers and excited children. Christmas decorations were everywhere. In the main square was a giant fir tree covered with coloured lights. They could hear carols being sung over the square speaker system. They moved on towards Rochford, their destination. In contrast to Basildon, the countryside around was black and forbidding, a sparsely populated area of few lights. They were used to streets full of people, the noise of traffic, and the hum of the city. They knew that Rochford was an Essex rural district, and not at all like their home, Finsbury Park, in London. As if that wasn't bad enough, their Uncle Giles lived in a place outside a small village called Shingdon. Sounded like the ends of the earth. Train at last pulled into Rochford station. He stepped from the carriage onto the powdery whiteness underfoot and looked around them. It was dark, and the lights along the platform made a weak show against the night. So quiet they could hear themselves walking, even though their footsteps were deadened by the snow. 5 o'clock in the evening, and it looks as though everyone's gone to bed, grumbled Colin. Christmas was only 7 days away, and here they were in a strange place with no real celebration to look forward to. Both of them felt pretty miserable, but they knew they had to make the best of an unfortunate time. "That's Uncle Giles," said Jill, pointing to a man in a heavy overcoat just near the station exit. "I don't know," replied her brother, gripping their suitcase. "We'd better go ask." By the time they reached the exit, however, the person had gone. They passed through the ticket barrier and found themselves on a road which sloped down to the town below. Everywhere was soft with new snow. There was no car waiting outside. The area looked quite deserted. Colin felt responsible for his younger sister, though in truth he knew she was just as capable as he was in an emergency. "To phone the cottage. She may have got the times wrong or the trains wrong, and still be at home," said Colin. "You look after the suitcase, Jill." Found some coins in his pocket and went to the telephone booth near the taxi stand. Their mother had written their Uncle Giles's number on a slip of paper. Colin dialed it, only to find that the phone at the other end rang several times without being answered. Just as he left the booth, a taxi arrived. The driver took out a newspaper and began to read it by the light from his courtesy lamp above the rear view mirror. Colin studied the man's face for a few moments before walking across to the vehicle. The driver wound down his window and Colin spoke to him. "Excuse me, could you tell me how much it costs to go to Chase Cottage, Ashington?" "Giles Foster's place?" £3. The taxi driver looked at Colin quizzically. "You want to go there?" Colin shivered, looked at the dark town, and made a sudden decision. There were still flakes of snow in the air, and it was getting colder. There were ice beards on the window and the sides of the houses. He decided it was best that the two of them got to the cottage as soon as possible. Out in the country, the wind seemed harder and sharper than it did in London. "Please," he told the driver, "me and my sister, she's over there. I'll call her." "Jill, come on, we're taking a taxi." They drove out of the town towards the nearby village of Ashington, leaving most of the houses and lights behind. They caught a last glimpse of a family crowded around their television set, with colours flickering behind the glass panes, and then the road disappeared into blackness. Could have been anywhere, in the middle of a forest, a desert, a marshland. The headlights of the car only picked out the ruts of the car wheels in the snow and the occasional whitened hedgerow. The taxi driver asked them if they had expected to be met by someone at the station. "Yes, we were, by our Uncle Giles." "He must have got the times of the trains wrong," said Jill. "He should have been there, but he wasn't." Colin saw the taxi driver frown in the rear view mirror. "Doesn't sound like Giles Foster," he said. "Your uncle and me go way back." And I've always found him punctual." Colin shrugged. "Anybody can make a mistake, I suppose," he said. "We've never actually met Uncle Giles, not so as we can remember. Our mum's sick in hospital. She's got to have an operation, so she had someone call Uncle Giles, and he said he would take us for Christmas." "What about your dad?" asked the driver, peering out into the blackness as they wound along a country lane. Snow had started falling heavily again, and large white flakes were flying into the windscreen, some sticking there. Wipers were having to work hard to keep the driver's vision clear. "It's not with us," answered Colin, reluctant to let his stranger into a family affair. Car suddenly pulled off the main road and went jolting along what must have been a mud track, through some stark trees which jumped at them out of the headlights. Tangled thickets narrowed the width of the track the further they went in, and a feeling of apprehension took Colin. He suddenly had a chilling thought that maybe the taxi driver was kidnapping them, and realised how foolish he had been to just jump into the car without checking with the station staff first. Maybe he thought their dad was rich and would pay a lot of money to get them back again. "Where are we going?" said Colin sharply. The driver did not seem put out by his tone, but sounded surprised. "Yes, cottage. That's where you asked for, wasn't it?" "Here it is now." They pulled up outside a wooden shiplap cottage, and Colin let out a little sigh of relief. In the headlights he could see that it was a shambling, one-story dwelling, with some room. At least there were windows up there. He assumed these were bedrooms. All around the cottage and at the back there were sinister-looking trees. "Blackthorns," thought Colin, remembering the word from his uncle's letter to his mother. There was only a faint glow of light coming from the front windows, but he was anxious to get indoors now, out of the cold, out of the night. The driver took the suitcase from the boot of the car and propped it against the picket fence. When Colin held out 3 coins for him to take, Mum said, "Oh, I'll sort it out with Giles in a minute. I want to make sure he's home first. It don't look much like it." Just then a call came over the taxi radio, and the driver found he was being asked to pick up another fare from another location. He said, "If your uncle's not there, you'll find the key under the mat. Go in and get warm. I'll come back later to make sure you're all right." "Thank you," said Jill, and gave him one of her famous smiles that showed most of her gums as well as her teeth. "Yes, thanks," said Colin, feeling a little guilty now that he had misjudged the man, though he knew it was always best to be wary of strangers, whoever they were. The car drove away, its headlights sweeping the thickets in a horizontal arc as the driver did a complete turn, leaving them with the cottage. As the lights had gone, the place looked very gloomy and forbidding. Still, there was that glow from inside the cottage which held a promise, if nothing else. Jill began to drag the case down the snow-covered pathway, saying, "I can manage, I can manage," when Colin protested. "You can manage," grumbled Colin, his breath coming out in ghostly plumes. "But will we have any suitcase left when we get there?" Still, he knew better than to argue with his sister, who was sharper witted than him in many ways, and he ran forward and tried the front door. It was indeed locked. There was a lion's head iron knocker on the door. It was ice cold to the touch and stiff. He hammered with all his might for at least a minute. The sound echoed through the cottage. No one answered. Finally, Jill found the doormat under the snow and lifted it. Underneath, there was a rusty key, as well as the corpses of a few summer bugs. "You can have the dead bodies," she said, "and I'll have the key." "Thanks very much, sis," Colin said sarcastically, and was faintly pleased when she couldn't turn the key in the lock. Had to let him try. Unfortunately, it didn't work for Colin either. Had frozen, and they had to take turns to huff warm breath into it for a few moments before the mechanism would budge. Finally, got the door open and pulled the heavy suitcase in. Felt warm inside, as though someone had not long left the room. Colin pulled off his woolen gloves. "Hello, Uncle Giles," Colin called. No answer. Strange smells hit Colin's nostrils of musty furniture and old persons' carpets and curtains. Great Uncle Giles was a bachelor. Mother had warned them that the place might not be entirely wholesome. Still, in the dim light, this room looked reasonably uncluttered. The glow they had seen through the window was coming from an open fire in the living room. Jill tried the light switch, but nothing happened. "Just our luck," she said, "a power cut or something." "Doesn't matter," Colin replied. "We'll just have to wait until it comes back on. Even if Uncle has got a home computer, it won't work without electricity." "Might have a gas one," said Jill jokingly. Colin looked around the living room, his eyes becoming used to the dim light of the fire. What he saw did not encourage any hope of his uncle owning a computer. Old dusty books lined two of the walls, and a sepia photograph of young men sitting on chairs under a palm tree hung on the third. The table, writing bureau, and Welsh dresser looked dark brown and gleamed with an ancient light. An old person's furniture. Carpet looked as if it had come from the floor of an Indian takeaway. Even the television looked as if it had been thrown away before Colin was born, and someone had fished it off a junk heap and got it working again. "Very much doubt it though, sis. Not even a steam-driven one by the looks of it. Have to forget our plan for a while." Plan was that they'd invent a new video game in order to make themselves enough money to get their father home. Dad was in Saudi Arabia, working for a petroleum company. He had been unable to find work in England and wanted to make his fortune out in the Middle East so that he could open a bicycle shop. It's not really a pipe dream. Colin and Jill were indeed whiz kids when it came to home computers, and had been playing video games since they were 6. It was just another step to inventing one themselves. A 16-year-old friend of theirs had set up a workshop in his garage and was well on the way to producing his third video game for sale in the shops. He had sold reasonably well due to lack of competition. Today, so far, had been pretty mediocre. He was a businessman, not an inventor. His ideas lacked the flair and imagination that he knew Jill and Colin could give. If Jill and Colin could come up with a really good, he had told them, could make a fortune between them. You invent the game and produce and market it, the boy had told them. We'll split the profits three ways. So the two of them had come up with a brilliant idea, but that would be difficult without a home computer to work on. Something shifted in the grate, and Jill jumped. What was that? She whispered. Colin stared at his sister's face, shining in the dying light, and knew she would hate it if they were left in total darkness. It was a weird house. The silence was continually broken by the creaks and groans of the timber-framed cottage and the whistling of the wind around the chimney pot. From the mantelpiece came the slow tick-tock of a clock shaped like Napoleon's hat. "It's nothing," he told her. "The logs on the fire just moved." "Why?" came the sensible question from Jill. "Well, I dunno. Because they're burning away, I suppose." "We're going to go out soon, if we don't get some more," said Jill. "There don't seem to be any in the fireplace. We'll go and have a look in the kitchen for some. Maybe you'll find a torch in there." Colin went to an open doorway leading off the living room and stared into the solid wall of blackness beyond. "Is this kitchen?" he asked after a while. Jill retorted, "How would I know? Go in and find out." "We'll go in and find out. What am I supposed to do? Feel around the floor?" The doorway and went back to the fire. "Where on earth Uncle Giles got to? You think something's happened to him? Maybe he had a crash in his car, ran off the road in the bad weather or something." Bill said, "There's nothing we can do. We'll just have to wait until he comes home, or the taxi driver comes back." "We could phone the police," said Colin. "Let's wait a bit longer," suggested Jill. "We've only been here a little while. One of us could go outside and look for some wood. You can see a bit better out of doors." "Stay here then," said Colin, going to the front. Clock chimed once on the half hour, and Jill was visibly startled. "No way," she replied, coming up behind him fast. "I'm not staying in this spooky place on my own. I think the picture is alive. If we watch that dresser for long enough, it starts to shuffle forward." "Imagination," Colin said. "It doesn't matter what it is. I don't like it." So they both went outside, where it was indeed a little lighter than it had been indoors. Bitterly cold wind cut around the corner of the cottage. There were icicle fringes around the gutters, which glittered in the starlight. Every so often, a patch of snow from the roof slithered to the ground. They went around the house once, looking for a wood store, but failed to find anything. "Let's try the trees around the side." Maybe we can find some broken branches or something, suggested Jill. Now deep snow softened their footfalls as they went into the spinney and began looking for lumps in the whiteness. Most of the trees were blackthorns, which not only got in their way, but were too skinny to be of any use on the fire. Then they came to massive evergreens, whose boughs were weighed down with snow, so that some of them touched the ground. The snow had been too heavy for one old dead branch. It had snapped away under the strain and had fallen to the earth, where it had made a branch-shaped hole. "Oh, we carry this to the house," said Colin softly. "Okay," Jill said quietly. "Why are we speaking like this?" It was true. It had started the whispering. It was a reaction to the blackthorn thicket and the tangled briars that joined them together, almost as if they were making a net to trap unwary travellers. There was no real reason for such a feeling. All he knew was that he felt very uneasy, as if someone were watching them from close by, noting their activities. He stared into the knitted shapes created by the blackthorns, but thought he saw many different kinds of darkness. Could make out no definite forms. It was simply a network of shades and shadows under the starlight. Footsteps coughed into the night from somewhere nearby, and Colin almost turned and ran. "I don't like this place much," he muttered, gritting his teeth. Jill said, "Who does? Come on, let's get this branch on the fire." Once they had the bough back at the house, they realised they would have to break it in half to get it on the fire. So Colin put the fat end in the gap between the gate and its post and pushed on it until it snapped, and it sent him flying forwards into the snow. He jumped to his feet quickly and looked around him, half expecting a laugh to come out of the darkness. It was still that sensation that he was being followed. "Messing about," said Jill. "I'm not." "Oh, never mind." He didn't want to tell her he was jittery, because that would make her scared too, and he could only just handle himself at the moment. Besides, although he felt so uneasy about his surroundings, he hated to look a fool. I took two halves of the branch back into the cottage and luckily managed to fit it into the fire. The logs immediately began spurting coloured gases, burned green and blue. There was an instant flare, though, which helped brighten the room. Shadows danced around the whitewashed walls, leaping out from some solid objects and slipping under others. The only trouble was that the logs tended to crackle and split a little, sending smouldering bits of bark flying into the stone fireplace. Colin realised they would have to watch the fire closely in case one of the glowing bits reached the carpet. It wouldn't do to burn down Uncle Giles's cottage for him. The next thought that occurred to him was that they ought to secure the place properly. If they had been followed from the thicket, then they needed to lock the front door. He found a bolt and shot it home. Once they were locked inside, he felt safer, though there was still that eerie atmosphere in the room, sort of anticipation, as if the cottage were expecting someone to visit. Colin found himself looking over his shoulder at the door while he warmed his hands by the fire. Jill lit the fire and began inspecting the room. She came across a large carved wooden chest, undoubtedly from the same Indian takeaway as the carpet. She tapped it with her foot. I read a story once, she said, where a girl got locked in a chest playing hide and seek. They never found her, and they didn't lift the lid for 100 years. When someone did, there was nothing but a skeleton inside, all crouched up. "You're a cheerful sort," grumbled Colin. Bill said, "Why don't we open it and look inside?" I knew that Jill was testing him. They marched over to the trunk, and before she could stop him, he threw back the lid. They both took their time before sneaking a look inside, only to see with some relief it was indeed full of blankets. "Satisfied?" he asked. "I knew it was blankets all the time," said Jill. Went and sat by the fire. A short while later, silence was interrupted by a sharp rat-a-tat on the front door. Someone was tapping with the knocker, but not at all firmly. It was almost as if the caller felt he might be disturbing the occupants by knocking at all. Colin looked into his sister's eyes. "Shall we answer it?" he whispered, having a reason now to keep his voice low. He received a wide-eyed look, shrug of the shoulders. Colin and remained still. Not him again. This time, even more gently. And a voice cried, "In there, the pair of you! You bolted me out!" It sounded like a man with a country dialect. "Who are you?" cried Jill, her voice wavering. The reply was muffled, as if the person outside were swathed in a scarf, or had their head down deep in their coat collar. "Giles Foster!" Colin let out a sigh of relief. "Uncle Giles?" he said, and unbolted the door. A few moments later, a tall, thin gentleman stood before them, his eyes red and rheumy, and his face pale. "It's bitter cold out there," he said, loosening the long scarf around his little neck. Didn't take it off, removed a black hat from his sharp, sharp as a woodman's axe. "I hate the winter when it cuts into my bones like this. You," he pointed at Colin, "and you," a long finger was directed at Jill. "You're children. You don't feel the cold, not like us old uns. Bolt the door again, will you?" Colin did as he was told, ramming the huge bolt into its slot. Giles Foster went immediately to the fire and sat in the overstuffed armchair at its side. "I'll keep my coat on for a while," he said, "until I've warmed through. I'm chilled to the marrow. Not much meat there to keep out the winds these days." Indeed, he did look thin and haggard. his scrawny neck disappearing down into the rolls of the woolen scarf. Cheeks were hollow and pinched, and the bones stuck out like points just below the outer corners of his red rimmed eye. There was a weary look about him, as if he were attempting to conquer some wasting illness and losing the fight. "Give me your hand, girl," he ordered, grasped her palm. "And yours too, boy." Thin fingers were like frozen marble. Jill pulled away sharply, but to cover her bad manners, remarked, "You are cold." "People," replied Giles, "of my age feel it worse than children. I once thought I shouldn't mind being old, that it would be quite comfortable, but I won't be, I'm sure. It'll be damned uncomfortable, especially in weather like this." Now, where was we? He let go of Colin's fingers and started into the fire, rubbing his hands together with a pebbly sound. He looked intently at the hissing logs, one of which was burning strongly now, and seemed to lose himself in it for a few minutes. Colin said we had to take a taxi from Rochford station because you weren't there to meet us, Uncle. The taximan said he would come back to sort things out with you. Oh, did he now? Did he now? Yes, yes, I were at the Hockley railway station. My Kingdom village is between the two stations, you see. I expected you at that one. Still, never mind. You're here now. No harm done." His eyes shone brightly from the depths of his narrow face as he peered at the children. "No harm done. You had no bad encounters, I trust?" "Counters?" asked Jill. Giles turned his head quickly. "Yes, with the ghost." Colin swallowed hard, and his toes suddenly developed pins and needles. Almost without thinking, because he really didn't want to know, he asked, "Go." Giles studied him and then Jill. "Of course," he said at length, "you won't know about our ghost. I don't suppose nobody has told you, has they?" "Well, we have one. That's a common known fact. He haunts the spinney mostly, but sometimes comes in here, looking." "Who?" said Jill excitedly. "Who's he looking for?" "Not for nobody in particular. For a way to leave this earth, that's what's for." Colin tried to change the subject, not because phantoms and spooks worried him, because he, well, he only half believed in such things, because it seemed to excite their uncle. Giles's face changed, became feverishly animated when he was speaking. It was almost as if the word ghost inflamed his imagination. His eyes became too bright, his lips quivered, and his expression was more frightening than what he was actually saying. "The lights have gone," Collins said in order to change the subject. Maybe it's a fuse or something. Giles stared at him for a moment in the firelight, remarked, "Light?" and then pointed to the Welsh dresser. "There's some candlesticks in there, lad, on the shelf under the plates. Bring them here." Colin went to the dresser, and sure enough, there were two half-burnt candles lying on a shelf. He brought them to the fire, and lit them on one of the logs. He then placed the two lighted sticks, one either end of the mantelpiece, in the ornate brass candle holders that were fixed on brackets to the wall. Added light made a room a little more comforting, but when he took a look at the expression on his sister's face, Colin realised the talk of apparitions not over. Jill was fascinated by ghosts, even though she claimed there were no such things. "We didn't see any ghosts when we were in the spinney," she said to Giles. He looked at them quickly. "You was in the spinney? What? Spinney? There in the dark? Wasn't you afraid?" "Oh," said Jill, sitting on the mat before the blazing logs and hugging her knees. "I don't believe in ghosts." "Ghosts?" snapped Giles, and for a minute he looked quite angry. His eyes shocked Colin, and he almost put an arm around his sister to protect her. Then Giles shook his head slowly. Sad expression gradually replaced the stern look. Suddenly, the logs on the fire spat a shower of sparks into the fireplace. Giles sat up straight and pointed. "What's that?" he cried. "What?" asked Colin nervously. "Them logs. Where did they come from?" Jill said, "Got them from under that big tree in the spinney." "What's the matter, uncle?" "The big tree in the spinney," repeated Giles, still staring into the flames of the spitting logs. "Oh, you tree!" Looked across at them with red-rimmed eyes. "No wonder." He was silent for a moment. Then he continued, "Yews is ancient trees. They knows all the secrets. They can live to more than 1,000 years, those greeners. One's only half such an age. Still and all," he played with the button on his overcoat, "means you'll meet the ghost. That much is certain." Children glanced nervously towards the door. Despite their conviction that spectres were simply inventions of an over-imaginative mind. "Why do you say that, Colin?" asked Giles. "There's no such thing as ghosts. Really, you spoke on that once already," replied their uncle, using a poker to stir the logs, and getting another shower of sparks for his trouble. "Them that repeat things really don't mean what they says. Usually mean the opposite. Let me speak more on this ghost, and then you can make up your own minds." Jackson coughed once, and then told the tale. Memphis was fiddling a bit, working round to finishing off the century. There were this Woodman, a fine figure of a man, He cut trees like some folks cook butter. So it's time to lay aside his axe and go coastal a bit. He'd been coppicing and pollarding and cutting down trees all his life, and had reached an age when his muscles and bones complained in bed of a night. Coppicing and pollarding, well, there's special ways of trimming trees so that they send out more growth. Sort of pruning. The cutting down of trees, that's a different story. Uncle Giles' cheeks grew waxy in the firelight as he talked, and his eyes had a faraway look to them. See, in them days, they didn't do much in the way of replanting, and the woodmen over the centuries had all but destroyed the forest, leaving only a copse or two, or three. Some say the old yew tree killed him on purpose while he were on his way to the church. Killed on purpose, repeated Jill. You mean the yew tree attacked him? Seems so theatre-like as that, I'm sorry to report. There he were, all dressed up in his best togs. When he walked under the old yew tree, he were on his way to a carol service just a few days before Christmas. He never arrived at the carols, though several folks was expecting him. So once all the singing were done, they went out looking for him. They didn't need to go far. He were close by the neck. Somebody walked under the old yew and caught a clip on his ear from a dangling boot. When he looked up, there were the woodman, gripped by the throat in a fall of a branch, swinging backwards and forwards as easy as a dead rabbit on a string. Since that time, he's been wandering the spinney, haunting the place and the people who own Chase Cottage, making a nuisance of himself every time someone burns a piece of the yew that took his life. Colin cried, "That's why he's coming tonight, because we burned a branch of the yew." "That's the reason," said Giles. "He don't do it that often, you see, being as you don't burn too well. Spits and sparks, and those who know about kindling a fire never use you in their grates. It's the woodman's only chance to send his spirit to rest." "Why?" asked Jill. "Why is it his only chance?" Giles stopped and stared into the flame. "What is it?" asked Jill, pointed with a lean finger. "I do believe that it might be the very branch that strangled the woodman, though of course I can't be sure. Then the weasel on a fancy were, and doomed to roam that were left of the forest he had cut down with his axe. There were no going straight to heaven, of course, because the woodman was not a particular religious man. The way of his death were very mysterious, as you can see, and until someone living guesses exactly how the woodman met his death, the spirit is not to be put to rest. In those days, people knew about ghosts, and when he started appearing before the owners of the cottage, there were much thought put to the question of his death. Some of the best brains in the village came up with ideas from suicide to murder. but failed to reach the answer right. These days, no one cares anymore. I wouldn't know what to do if they did. It's a terrible story, said Jill, sitting down at the old man's feet. So the woodman who has to keep coming back as a ghost until someone guesses how he was killed. Come on, Colin. We can think of how he died. The way we play enigmas. Colin didn't feel much like playing games, but sighed in agreement to please her. Giles nodded slowly, but added, I feel I have to warn you that if you fail to get the right answer, there is a penalty. What? Asked Colin, his skin tingling with fright. The woodman's ghost will return night after night and harass you until you're half out of your mind with fear. When you think you can't be scared no more, he'll strike your soul with such terror that you'll wake up in the morning dreading the coming dark. Children could see that their uncle was deadly serious. This had become more than a game, but there was a compulsion to go on that neither of them could resist, even though they were more scared than they had ever been in their lives before. Bill swallowed hard and said, and sweep the branch down low and scoop him up. Helpful, said Colin, seeing the disapproval on his uncle's features. Would have to be a pretty strong wind. Can we ask you questions, uncle? You can try, replied Giles. Right. Now, did the woodman climb the tree? Yes, he climbed the tree. And slipped, cried Jill. Possible, replied Giles. Did he climb the tree in the first place? Considered this. He and Jill were used to playing Enigma games on their home computer, so it was just a matter of getting rid of the impossible to come up with the probable. It was Christmas, muttered Colin, and the yew is an evergreen. I know that much. And he was climbing up to get fir cones. Giles shook his head in contempt. Although the yew is an evergreen, it has scarlet berries, not cones. You know very little about trees, boy. You learn nothing in your life. Jill, who loved elaborate wild guesses, said emphatically, kite caught in the branches, and the woodman wanted to take it home to his grandchildren, so he climbed up to get it. Wrong again. The woodmen were a bachelor. Colin thoughtfully. An old bachelor. Growing on you, you might say, said Giles a little testily, but not too set in his ways. So he wouldn't have a girlfriend, would he? He wasn't climbing up to break off a few small branches to make some sort of bouquet or something. Something struck Colin as to being very likely. Maybe he was going to help decorate the church, he cried. Why wouldn't he have had a lady friend, said Giles stiffly. There were a little sap in his bones. He may very well have a lady for which he carried. As for decorating the church, he catch him dead first. He just weren't the sort. He was a rough and ready sort of fellow, not a flower decorator. Jill said carefully, "Now, this girlfriend of his, she was at church, wasn't she? Otherwise, he wouldn't be going there. Said he wasn't very religious, so why else would he be going to a carol service?" Giles clasped his hands together, and for the first time his eyes showed approval. "Good lass, good lass." "So," said Colin, frowning, "he was on his way to church to see his girlfriend, though they were both quite old, and he wanted to take her some firewood as a present. You forgot that you don't burn well. This man were a woodsman who knew on such things." "I like the idea of him having a girlfriend," said Jim. "It's romantic. Did you like him much?" "Ah, there's the great tragedy. Not a great deal. She were one of them spinsters, you see, who thought on men as idle, layabouts. He once tried to kiss her, cheek of course, and she gave him short shrift." Colin remembered trying the same thing on a girl at a recent birthday party. You need an excuse for that sort of thing when they don't want you to do it. "Excuse," repeated Jill slowly. "I wasn't taking her a bunch of anything because you said so. What's a for you tree? Nothing but you berries and branches, surely." "Maybe a bit of ivy," said Colin. "Bit of ivy?" cried Giles. "What sort of ivy?" Colin was puzzled. "Are there different kinds?" He received a slow, encouraging nod. "Lots of climbing creepers in them woods out there. All sorts, if you think on it." Will suddenly sat up straight and clicked her fingers. All attention switched to her. She laughed. "Got it!" she cried. Giles and Colin both stared at her. "Have you?" asked Giles. "Then," said Colin sceptically. Bill beamed at them, a little smugness showing through her smile. "Mistletoe," she said. "It's a creeper, like ivy, isn't it? He's climbing up the tree to get some mistletoe, so that he could have an excuse to kiss the sister, and slipped and fell, getting caught in the fork of the branch." Giles coughed and stirred the log once more with the poker. The fire hissed at him, blue and green smoke flaring from within the logs, and he gave it a jab. There was a peaceful look on his face. "Last," he said in a voice full of intense satisfaction. "Long last." Just be able to close his eyes, go to rest. Three of them sat there. The candles burned down slowly, and the Yule log spat angrily into the place on the mantelpiece. Napoleon's hat ticked away, deepening the silence of the room. Colin's heartbeat seemed to be keeping time with the old clock. He was wondering why their uncle was playing this game of silence with them. It looked as though he was waiting for something. What did he expect them to do? Suddenly, Giles sat bolt upright in his chair and cocked his head as though listening into the night. "Listen," he said. Then he pointed a bony finger at the door. There was an expression of triumph on his face. Children immediately guessed that the ghost was coming. Jill went quite pale. "Stop it," she said. "You're frightening me." "Ah," said Giles, "but you don't believe in ghosts. Remember, all you have to do is tell him you know the answer to the riddle, and he'll go away, won't he?" Colin jumped to his feet and ran to the side window, the one that looked onto the spinney. He pulled the curtain back with one hand and peered out into the night. Pane of glass were frosted over, and the tiles, the corners, but as soon as he stared into the darkness, he saw a dark shape coming slowly through the trees towards the front of the house. The figure was having great difficulty with the blackthorns, cut at his coat with their thorns. Colin gave a cry and stepped back from the window, letting the curtains fall back into place. "What is it?" said Jill in a strangled voice. "What is it?" "Somebody's coming," said Colin, and heard a crack just beyond the gate, as if someone had trod on a twig. Jill went to the front window now and looked out, and then stepped back from the panes, just as Colin had done. "A man dressed in black." "Black?" cried Giles. "Ah, people get covered in black." Woodman wore black for visiting the choir mistress. He were a sober man who took his courting seriously. Gate creaked as it was opened, and then clicked shut. When he listened very hard, Colin could hear the squeak of snow under someone's leather soles. Footsteps came to the door of the cottage and then halted. "What's happening?" asked Jill, who had now gone over to the other side of the room, as far as possible from the door. "What's he doing? He can't get in, can he?" "The wood ghost. He can get into houses." There was a scrabbling around the lock, as if someone were fitting a key. "This used to be the Woodman's home, you see," said Giles. "So he has his own key. This was cottage, which is why there's no escape from him in here. He can come and go as he pleases." The lock clicked back and the door handle turned, but nothing happened. And the creature outside rattled the door back and forth, as if trying to force entry. The door held fast. "Can't come in," said Colin softly. "I bolted the door, remember?" Silence followed, then a tapping at the window pane. Colin went to the window and peered through the narrow gap where the curtains met. He could see a dark, hunched figure looking back at him with strange, warped eyes. The face which held those eyes was distorted by the ice that had formed in layers over the panes. Colin stepped back again, sharply, this time. The sound of snow squeaking, then hammering on the door. Giles, have to let him in, you know. He won't go away. Why don't you open the door? Can't do it. It has to be you. He smiled, his mouth a curve of red on his pale features. You don't believe in ghosts anyway. Flynn knew he had to do something. His heart was pounding in his chest and his fingers shaking. What if he were to let the ghost in? What was the worst that could happen? He felt sure they had guessed correctly how the woodman would die, so he wasn't here to hurt them. He just wanted to be told what they had discovered so that he could be released from his need to haunt the cottage. "I'll open the door," he announced, and marched to the bolt, throwing it back before Jill's squeal hit his ears. The door swung back, and an old man stood before them. His face was white and lined, and his eyes colder than winter. He glowered at Colin, holding the boy with his gaze. Jill came across the room to grasp Colin's hand, and they both wilted under the apparition's splendor. "I believe in ghosts," whispers Colin. "I really do. I can tell you, if he died, you'll be free. You can stop roaming the spinney." The ghost stepped inside the cottage doorway and kicked the snow off his shoes. "What on earth are you talking about, young man?" said. "What took you so long to answer the door? I'm freezing. Let me get by that fire." He suddenly reached out and gripped the children by the shoulders, one hand on each. "Jill, eh? Yes, I can see the family resemblance. How did you get in?" "Me," said Jill, "under the mat." "Ah, yes, the key. It's been there so long I'd forgotten. I put it there." "Miss Woodman," began Colin, but the ghost interrupted him with, "Woodman? What's this Woodman? I'm your Uncle Giles. The car broke down on the way to the railway station. I've been walking for over an hour. I came over the fields. It's quicker that way. And here we are. Sorry I wasn't here to meet you. How did you get here?" "See," said Colin faintly. "Well done. Showed a bit of initiative, eh? Like that in my relations. Who brought you? It was Bert Wilson, wasn't it? He's the only one who knew about the key. Trust him. Memory like an elephant. Well, let's get this door closed." He gave the door a shove with his foot, and it slammed shut. "And let's have some light in here, for goodness sake." He reached up and turned a switch. The room was suddenly bright. When Colin and Jill turned to look at the chair by the fire, it was, of course, Tea. The ghost of the woodman had played his final trick on the living and had gone now to the place where it belonged, in the land of the dead. On the chair where it had been sitting were a few droplets of moisture, as if the material had been touched in passing, like frost. "Now," said Uncle Giles, "you mentioned someone called Woodwind or something. See then, an imaginary pal, eh? Ha ha! I used to invent my own playmates at your age." He stared at them intently. Well, perhaps not. You seem a little too old to be playing pretend. We are, said Jill firmly. Yes, thought so. What about this Woodstock chappie then? Oh, Uncle Giles turned and stared at the spitting rocks. You on the fire. Never put a Yule log, he said sternly. It spits. And paused, then added, brings the ghost too. But I don't want to frighten you. Well, down the fire, and perhaps he will come. Never burn Yule logs, asked Colin. Of course not. Haven't you just said so? Jill nodded at her brother. To count for it then. He's already been, she said. For what? Asked Uncle Giles. And when he did not receive a reply, went on, good Lord, you don't mean old Giles has been here? Colin said, another Giles? Giles Foster, my ancestor and namesake. What am I saying? Your ancestor too. Your great uncle Giles, as a matter of fact. Was he? Well, I'm blowed. He didn't ask you to solve any riddles, did he? He did. And we gave him the right answer, said he. We won't be haunting the cottage anymore. They're all looked at them with some well done, well done. Never dared to have a go myself. Especially every time I mistakenly burned a piece of that you. But if I had tried to answer the riddle and got it wrong, it would have been every night. Well, now he's gone forever, said Colin. I hope you're right. You both seem pretty sure of yourselves. Now, come into the den. I want to show you something I bought today. So for the pair of you to make your Christmas with an old man a bit more exciting. He led them into another room, switching on the lights as he did so. "Ah!" he cried, gesturing towards the it was a brand new home computer. Your mother rang me and said it would give you a lot of fun. I don't understand the things myself, but you'll soon sort it out between you, I expect. Now let me show you to your rooms. I expect you're both quite tired after all your ghost busting. We'll have a cup of cocoa and some biscuits, and then later on, when the house was silent, Colin got up and crept to his sister's room. Her window overlooked the spinney. Together they stared out onto a starlit landscape at the snow among the white trees. There was a kind of mist out there, weaving its way between the tree trunks. It might have been old Giles Foster's ghost, having a last look before leaving this world. I bet I know what you're thinking, said Jill. Asked Colin. Jill gave him one of her gummy smiles. We've got our video game, the one that'll make us enough money to get Dad home, haven't we? Colin thought quickly, and luckily it came to him. I mean the game called the Woodman's Enigma. It's the one, said Jill. Do hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. I wrote down a couple of little facts for you. It was written in 1991, 34 years ago, when I was 15 years old. I've had this book for a very, very long time because I turned 60 next year. I want to trip down memory lane, these books up, and I'll read them. I was a big fan of point horror when I was a child. Thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed reading. Nothing to do with point horror at all. So it's a bit of a memory lane story that I'll give you tonight. I do so hope you've enjoyed it. Now, who's been chatting while I've been nattering away, giving you a story? Let's see who's here. Grandpa Beefers. You've changed your name again, lad, or at least I know you are. I'm really glad you're enjoying the story. You used to live in London. Maybe you knew Woodsman. Hiya, Fairy. Sound a bit dodgy, keeps cutting out. Hope Santa gets you a new microphone. Well, Grumpy, that would be a nice surprise. Grandpa Beefers, sorry I had to do something. And hello to you, Grandpa Beefers. I'm glad you liked the story, Digital Voodoo. Oh, Mr. Grumpy. You too, Beefers. Wave is off when you are good. Thank you for a wonderful story. Oh, you're more than welcome. I just thought I'd just say hello to everyone. Send you some love hearts, some smiley faces, some parties. There we go. So I thought we'd spend 5 minutes just saying hi to everybody. I really hope you've enjoyed that story. I've been a massive fan of point horror ever since I grabbed one off the shelf, which was Perfume by Caroline B. Cooney back in the day. Oh my goodness me. I would have been, oh, early teens. Absolutely loved everything to do with point horror. And I've read them right up to my early 20s. Makes my heart happy thinking about them, reading them. Takes me back to the time when things were slightly simpler and I didn't have half the problems that I have now. It's nice to just have that opportunity to go back in time. Even if we can't physically do it, we can with stories, things that give us comfort. That's what these are. A comforting time machine back to when things were a lot simpler. Anyway, if you've enjoyed that story, plenty more where that came from, and they are rather chilling, aren't they? Oh, my darlings, it is almost 9:20, and I am way up later than I normally am. So thank you very much for joining us. Mwah. I'll blow you a kiss and I'll wave bye-bye, my darlings. Good night. Sleep well. Don't let the ghosts get you.